New York Giants going through what y'all need to know to make some money on his team in 2021. So 5-11 last year, not good. Main negative takeaway: Daniel Jones did not progress a whole lot. Now I'm going to argue, as I will later, at least in this video, that he's better than I think a lot of people think, but not even close to that elite tier. And defensively, there were definitely some positives. Their defensive coordinator, Patrick Graham, ended up doing a lot of positive things, which we will also talk about, but some lack of talent, which is still apparent going into this year. And overall, my record on them is another one we make and bank. If you've been with me, 9-3, 9-3-1, strong bets, 11-2, 28-16-1 overall. So I definitely was hitting the Giants. They were pretty easy to diagnose when they would be good, when they would be bad. Again, stuff we'll talk about. They really kind of depend on beating up on bad, or at least they have depended on beating up on bad secondaries and or not being able to do much of anything against good defenses. So for the roster in 2021, what are we looking at? Losses wise, there's some names on here, but frankly, no one I particularly care about. I think Kevin Zeitler, while he is okay as a guard, is pretty exceedingly overrated. He's not one of the top 5-10 guys in the NFL. I don't think he's close. And again, while he is starter worthy and they're going to miss him a little bit, it's kind of whatever. Cam Fleming was actively bad. Golden Tate at this point in his career was not good. He did some useful things still. I don't think he deserves to not be in the NFL or anything, but not a big loss. Colt McCoy, backup quarterback, and then a bunch of running backs who really, really don't matter. Defensively, two that are a lot bigger. Kyler Fackrell, actually a good player. He did benefit from the way they schemed him in this defense, but they did that for a reason. He could take advantage of the situations he was put in. He's a good player. And Dalvin Tomlinson, he was a captain. He's really, really good at what he does, mostly a run-defending defensive tackle. He is a lot more than that, though. And they are definitely going to miss him. Now we'll talk about what they have in his place still, but yeah, definitely going to miss him. Other than that, though, guys who either didn't play, shouldn't have played, or won't play in the future in the NFL. So additions wise, again, still kind of not a ton of huge things, but definitely some important ones. Offensively, the first one there is Kenny Golladay, obviously, that you want to talk about. Now, I have my personal issues with Kenny Golladay as an elite receiver, which we'll talk about once we go through position by position. But I would be completely lying and obviously being untrue if I were to say he's not a useful receiver in the NFL. We'll talk about how he is and what that looks like in this offense, of course. But that's definitely the big one. You get Kyle Rudolph in. He is a more than functional second tight end who's still a pretty capable receiver, especially in intermediate to underneath areas at this point in his career. John Ross, I think, is a player that is still actually pretty good and is useful for this team, just as he was for the Bengals. He obviously has his glaring issues that keep him from being a full-time receiver or full snap count receiver, but he's still all right. Other than him, though, Devontae Booker's whatever. Corey Clement, I think, is the worst running back in the NFL, and then Mike Glennon's a whatever backup quarterback. Defensively, another big one, Adoree Jackson, however you want to say it. He actually occupies a similar space, I think, across the league that Kenny Golladay does, where I don't think, despite his draft pedigree and name recognition, I don't think he's an elite guy, but definitely good and is going to help this team a lot. Actually, I think he's going to function in this game very well. It's pretty similar to what the Titans have played for a lot of the time that he's been there. They had Ifeadi Odenigbo, a player who's capable as an edge rusher, not great. Has been a rotational guy in the Vikings for a long time for a reason, but definitely worthy of being on the field at times. Ryan Anderson, actually pretty similar, although he's been hurt a lot, so he hasn't got to show off. Reggie Ragland, not a player I'm comfortable at all with having on the field in 2021. Actually, that's kind of it. I don't have much positive to say about him. So let's get into the roster real quick. This is their draft class with rookies. I'll talk about them once they get on an NFL field. Until then, I don't think there's much point in it because all you're doing is creating unfair expectations one way or the other. And again, it'll be real obvious real quick if they can play or not. So position by position, we get to go through the roster and talk about what they have, what these guys can do, and what they're going to do in the 2021 NFL season. The number in the top right is the total number of players at that position I have ranked, and the number to the right of the name is where that player ranks. So Daniel Jones, 23rd quarterback out of 70. So Daniel Jones, he's definitely an interesting one. I'll start with the positives for him, I think. because he does have some real positives, despite what some people may tell you. I don't think he's complete. I think he's very far from complete garbage, actually. What can he do, right? Well, he shows a willingness to throw the ball down the field, which, as far as NFL skill sets go, is frankly one of the most important things you can have. How good, how much rules favor the offense in the modern day, and how good receivers, just unbelievably good receivers are. Just the sheer action of throwing the ball down the field and not sucking at it is going to give you positive results way, way, way more often than it gives you negative results. And the positives are huge. So just that fact that somebody's willing to do that is going to help their baseline of production a lot. And Daniel Jones has shown very clearly that he can do that. Now, is he elite at it compared to other guys around the league? Definitely not. He doesn't have the accuracy, the touch that the, guy like whatever, Russell Wilson, obviously it's kind of an unfair comparison, but that those types of guys have. But he actually, he's got some stuff to him. He at times will float some balls in there pretty well, and I think he's capable, especially if he's throwing from a clean pocket, of doing stuff. And with the receivers they brought in, we'll talk about how that's actually a pretty good thing. But yeah, him specifically, so he's willing to do that. He actually can do it. That's helpful. He obviously, as everybody's seen the highlight of him in the almost long touchdown last year, he can use his legs really well. He's actually pretty damn fast. He's a good runner. He actually has a decent sense of when to do it a lot of times, at least straightforward. He gets into real issues, rolling out the pocket, which we'll talk about once we get to his negatives. But as a positive, yeah, he definitely adds stuff to your ground game as a team at quarterback. He is a guy who is willing to attack bad secondaries. I mentioned that earlier. He is the reason this team does that. Example being how they played the Cowboys last year. Because he does identify matchups down the field. He's, again, willing to throw the ball, target the ball in that area. And when he's not holding the ball for 30 seconds, which does happen sometimes, generally he's actually kind of good about getting the ball out in roughly time to let his receiver make a play. Now, I'm being cautious with how positive I want to talk about him because it's not like he's great at these things. It's just that he doesn't suck, which is, useful to a point. So as far as his negatives, though, he still, he doesn't really understand NFL defenses very well, if at all, especially good and or complicated ones. He has horrible turnover issues in the pocket as far as fumbles go because he really, really lacks pocket awareness, especially around the edges, which is that begins to be a real issue. His pocket mobility, while again, he can run pretty good as far as sliding in the pocket and being able to move his eyes to different, progressions in his route and in the plays that he's running. That's still pretty damn far behind of where you really, really want. So, he's a guy who has very clear weaknesses, and those weaknesses I think are pretty preventative of him being a whole lot better. But he does enough positive things where your team isn't screwed with him at quarterback. Mike Lennon, I don't want to talk about him too much. He's just a backup who's not very good. You don't want starting games. He's very far from the worst backup in the NFL, but he's not a guy who's going to do many positive things for you. Then we get to running backs. So with running backs, I always talk about how there's very few running backs in the NFL who really matter. Normally I say 3, 4, 5. I think maybe I'll expand that number to about 6, 7, 8. And if you see there, Saquon Barkley is 8th. I have quite a few issues, and I know I'm being negative with the Giants so far. I'm going to get a lot more positive as we go on, but I have some real issues with Saquon Barkley as a football player. And there are pretty clear reasons why he's not even particularly close to the top tier guys like Christian McCaffrey or Dalvin Cook or anything like that. So if you talk about, this theoretical idea of talent, right? Obviously he is. He's, fast, quick, strong, all that stuff. He's, 99 in every Madden attribute. But when you talk about how he actually functions as a player on the field, he is very similar to Deshaun Watson, or the way Deshaun Watson works at quarterback. Saquon Barkley works kind of the same way at running back. Now, notice I still think they're both in the top 10 at their respective positions, but they're definitely in the lower end because they consistently cause their team's plays to fail, which is something that the guys at the top of their respective positions don't do, or do significantly less frequently. what I mean by that with Saquon Barkley is that he is so often just trying to hit home runs that he ends up just ignoring holes that can like get like I'm talking like pretty big ones too. They can get you like 5-10 yards, which is really like that's valuable. He will end up ignoring those to do this weird shit and try to score touchdowns on every play. And while it does work, he's good enough to make it work a couple times. Cross your fingers for more than that a season. That is so damaging to your offense on a down-to-down basis, and it puts so much more pressure on your defense when you can't depend on a consistent source of moving the ball. Some teams, that's not always the running game. Some teams can do that with the short passing game. That is not the Giants. So he really can hurt your team. Now, the positives, I mentioned them earlier. He can, as far as like highlights go, do things that literally only – I don't know. Well, he can do things that literally no other running back in the NFL can do. I was going to say Christian McCaffrey comes pretty close, but and there is value to that. That is one of the ways running back can matter is taking any given handoff and turning it into a touchdown, and that's why he's still as high as he is. And I will also mention he's a pretty valuable receiver. I think they got a little bit too hyped up during his rookie year. He's not this. He's not Christian McCaffrey. He's not one of these like. Third down receiving backs who can go out and legitimately win against man coverage with good players. But he can be bad players for sure, which is valuable in itself. That's kind of, I don't want to spend too much time on him, but that's my kind of explanation why I don't think Saquon Barkley is all that close to being in the top tier running backs. Past him, depth-wise, it's bad. Devontae Booker is a really mediocre third down receiving blocking back. He actually, on the Raiders last year, he did look okay at times as a kind of run straight forward into a lot of space guy, which not exactly a unique skill set. But he's smart. He's been in the NFL a long time, whatever. I really hope you don't give him a lot of carries so he probably gets hurt, but whatever. Other than him, though, it's a bunch of guys who have either never played, aren't proven, are Alfred Morris, who's really old and slow, or Corey Clement, who, I don't want to talk too negatively, but that guy is really, really bad and shouldn't be in the NFL. So then we talk about, or as a running back, special teams, whatever. Then we talk about wide receivers. So, promise, this is the last time I'll be negative about a big name player. Kenny Golladay. What are my problems with Kenny Golladay? I think that he struggles in a lot of the ways that these big body receivers in the modern NFL do in terms of separating short to intermediate, which is more valuable than it's given credit for because that makes your offense function so much better and makes your quarterback's life so much easier. And while Kenny Golladay is not awful at that, he isn't particularly good. And that's my issue. So we're past that now. We can talk about the positives. He plays the ball in the air. He's one of the best at that in the NFL. He is legitimately very, very, very fast down the field. He actually can do some stuff after the catch. He uses his body very well. He does bring a ton of value to your team. I don't want to talk too negatively about him. He's definitely worth starting on a team. But those limitations do come up in terms of talking about how this offense will function, which we'll get to later, because he does not bring the consistency on a drive-to-drive basis that they receive almost all the receivers ranked ahead of him do. Darius Slayton, he, while it looks a lot different, actually brings very similar functionality to your offense in that he's very good down the field. He can beat legitimately good corners at times, which is a kind of unique thing about him. He can create separation intermediate very well, especially if given more than 2 or 3 seconds. He tracks the ball pretty well. Now, he doesn't really offer much after the catch, and he is not the same type of monster like in the red zone or anything like that Kenny Golladay is, which is why he's ranked just a little bit behind him. But let's be clear, Darius Slayton is very good, and I could easily justify having him as the best receiver on this team. Then Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard's fine. He's towards the top of this kind of group of receivers who are mostly just underneath guys who are going to win in spaces that are valuable but aren't like killing people down the field. He understands defenses. He knows how to sit in space. He knows how to move around, if a play is breaking down. He's decent. He can do some okay things against man coverage. I don't think he really has the high end talent. I think he really struggles against actually good defenses and good corners. But as far as a third receiver goes, it's hard to ask for more. He's pretty, he's fine. Kadarius Toney, first round rookie, might be pretty good. We'll see. John Ross, to talk about. So John Ross does things that are really, really valuable on an NFL field. He has every time he's played for the Bengals. Now he does have issues for sure too, but when you talk about how a receiver adds value, right? He does it so well because he gets open like way down the field, like every time. That's too strong, not every time, but at a rate way, way higher than other receivers. And it's not just because he's fast, right? Because, I mean, obviously that helps a ton. But if you look at literally a player on the same team in Dante Pettis, who's also fast himself, Dante Pettis doesn't do anything that John Ross is capable of doing. John Ross actually can run routes a little bit. He can create separation again, especially down the field. And it is a useful player. I actually like him as about your fourth, fifth receiver. I think he'd probably going to be really valuable for this team. But that's something I'll mention with him. CJ Board is really whatever. He doesn't do anything that almost any other receiver in the NFL is not going to do. Dante Pettis, like I said, I have real issues with him because despite his theoretical ability to create separation and play as a modern NFL receiver, I think he might literally be the least physical, weakest skill position player in the NFL. He is horribly, horribly prone to just curling up and dying at any sign of contact. And that's basically unplayable in the NFL. Now he is fast enough and quick enough to get separation at times, which is why he's still a little bit higher in rankings than like last or anything like that, because that does bring some value, but don't want him on the field. Austin Mack, again, he did some okay things at the end of the last year, but when you watch what happened, pretty clearly that's just more of a given an opportunity situation as opposed to, he's bringing something unique to the table. And then a bunch of guys who have not justified snaps in their NFL careers or, again, the rookie and Kadarius Toney. So we get to tight end. Now here, it's a little more encouraging. Evan Ingram, he's a guy. So he's unique in that he actually fits into this upper tier of tight ends who can actually like separate legitimately. You talk about, so there's Travis Kelce at the very top. He's not like that. But you talk about like a Gerald Everett. You talk about like an Irv Smith. You talk about a Darren Waller at times-ish. Evan Ingram can do all that, maybe even a little better than those guys can. His downfall is, he might be the worst blocker at his position. Actually, that's too strong. I don't think that's quite the case. I think he gets too negatively of that. He's not good at all, but, he's more than horrible. That and the drop stuff. He is one of the players. Normally, drops I think are pretty random, and even if a player has a lot, in any given year, it's not a huge deal. He's not one of those. He really looks shaky when he catches, even when he does catch the ball, and his drops seem natural, if that makes sense, which is definitely scary. He still provides a ton of value in terms of the things he does, which is why he's still ranked 11th despite all those drop issues and the complete non-ability blocking. But, he overall is still going to be a positive if he's on the field for your snaps because the dude is going to smoke linebackers or safeties to try to cover him like regularly, which does get you somewhere for sure. Talked about Kyle Rudolph earlier. He's just not fast enough to be higher than where he's ranked or to be a truly useful difference maker. But the dude understands defenses. He knows where to go to be open, and he still has one of the absolute, like opposite of Evan Ingram, one of the absolute, if not the best pair of hands outside of like DeAndre Hopkins in the NFL. Dude's wild at that. So you look forward to that. He's definitely still a useful player. Caden Smith is a guy who has shown that you're not screwed if he's your tight end on a small number of plays. I don't have much else to say about him, to be honest with you. Levine Toilolo I actually rather like. It was like a fourth tight end. He's mostly a meme player because he's like 6'10" or whatever like that. But he can block a little bit okay. And then it's a bunch of guys who, again, have not justified NFL snaps. Don't want to spend too much time talking about them. So offensive line. This is, unfortunately, probably the downfall of this team in some ways. It's not a horrible disaster with everyone healthy, but there are a ton of question marks, and those question marks I don't think have a lot of positive answers. So we'll start at tackle. There, I actually like them a little bit. Andrew Thomas, despite being pretty clearly the worst of the 4 first-round rookies last year, that's more of a testament to how good the other 3 were, and Jedrick Wills, Tristan Wirfs, and Mekhi Becton. Those dudes were all like nuts. Andrew Thomas was not. He especially struggled at the beginning of the year, but by the end of the year, I do think he showed that he is probably fine as a starter. And while he's, especially in pass protection, I don't think going to be elite at any point, he's not a complete disaster, and he can move dudes. Like he can play. Matt Pert, small sample size, but he actually, now you got to remember, I still have Thomas ahead of him because we're talking about very different expectations going into last year. But Matt Pert, given what was expected of him, I think he's awesome, actually. I think he, and his snaps, barely ever showed me anything that I was concerned about in pass protection. Like, I think he has a real chance to be somebody there. And while as a run blocker, he doesn't really have great functional strength, he can get to his spots a little bit. That's kind of, I think, I don't want to hype him up too much there. That is where he struggles. But hell, if you're pass protection is what you want to tackle, I think they might got some there. Nate Solder is not very, very not good. He's coming back after sitting out last year. I can't imagine he got better by taking a year off. Please don't play. Jesus Christ, please do not play him. He's really, really bad. He is at least a veteran who's probably not going to blow pass coverage assignments. That's almost the most positive thing I can say about him. Then at guard, Shane Lemieux, a rookie last year, a late round rookie who I actually did, again, I think did some like pretty damn good things given what was expected of him. He's not elite by any means, and he's still not somebody I'm like super comfortable going into a year and being like, yes, that's my starter at your position, but he wasn't a disaster. He showed some things as a run blocker that I thought were actually like pretty encouraging, and I'm comfortable with him. Will Hernandez, not so much. The dude is not good. He's just very slow laterally, and while he does have the strength to like bulldoze dudes in double teams, so what? So does almost every other guard in the NFL. And when he's not doing that specific thing, he's pretty bad at literally everything else. He's not quite bad enough to like tank your offense by himself, but if he's anything but your worst lineman, you're going to have issues. As a backup, actually, you have Kenny Wiggins, who I think is almost the exact same player as Will Hernandez, and maybe I could argue is better. He's just had a pretty inconsistent amount of snaps throughout his career with the Lions. But yeah, he's another just like run block only type guy who you hope doesn't get you killed in pass protection. Then at center, Nick Gates he's kind of been a nice story. I will admit that I was way, way, way too down on him going into last year. I thought he was going to be like the worst center in the NFL. That wasn't even close to the case. But he's definitely still not good. He is not a great run blocker by any means. He definitely tries hard, but that he's a player where you can see the physical limitations. And as a pass protector, he seems smart enough to handle the duties, but again, he gets driven back way too much for my tastes, and he's not a player that I'm excited about starting, despite me not thinking he's all that bad. So this offense as a whole, despite all the kind of negative leanings I've been talking about, when you look at this offense as a whole, I think there's a way that they function like decently, like middle of the NFL level, because as a running offense, they're not going to be good. I'm just going to tell you, they're just not going to be good. Even if Saquon Barkley is fully healthy, while he would still put up fantasy numbers, sure, they are not going to be good on a down-to-down basis. But it's 2021, so it is important. It's more important than people give it credit for, but that's not what's driving your success as an offense. That's how you pass the ball. And they have real chances to be okay there, because as a pass protecting line, as long as Will Hernandez and Nick Gates don't like completely suck, which I don't think they're going to, you're probably talking about a not disaster up there. Then you have Daniel Jones, who I talked about earlier, like willingly putting the ball down the field to Kenny Galladay and Darius Slayton, and potentially John Ross, and that's going to lead to a bunch of positive. I can guarantee you that's going to lead to a bunch of good plays for their offense. And if they do it enough times per game, if they really lean into that identity, you're going to get some games where they kind of go off, where, they get lucky a little bit, sure. But those receivers are talented. And again, if Daniel Jones is doing him, it's going to end up working out. And frankly, they have a chance of underneath play working out, okay. Kadarius Toney might be that dude as far as a modern NFL slot receiver. Evan Ingram occupies a lot of those spaces. If he gets over his drops, he's really valuable there. And so while this offense is still really, really going to struggle with consistency because of their quarterback and because they just lack any guaranteed yardage option, there's enough around there to, again, make you think that their offense is going to have a chance. So defensively, this one I'm going to be a lot more positive in general about because it's better on the side of the ball mostly. So on the defensive line, they're still pretty damn good here. So you do lose Dalvin Tomlinson, as I mentioned earlier, but the guys here are still good. Leonard Williams is awesome. He's another one of these guys who has been good the whole time, but his sack numbers, when he was with the Jets, were down because of the situation he was in and just because sack numbers don't really represent how good a defensive lineman is. He's a guy who's going to get penetration very consistently. He's extremely good as a run defender. And I mean, shit, that's not like all you can ask for from a defensive tackle is a guy who's going to get after the passer meaningfully and going to be a dominant force against the run. That's Leonard Williams. Austin Johnson, likely to start at nose tackle. Maybe it's Danny Shelton on first down or whatever. But Austin Johnson is good. He was a rotational guy for a couple years here with the Giants, and every time he was on the field, I tell you what, he can play. He's not like a lead or anything. I don't have huge expectations for him, but when you're talking about the guys he's playing next to, I mean, he's going to look pretty good. I'm very comfortable with that. Then you have Dexter Lawrence starting on the other side, who is absolutely very good himself. He's actually similar to Leonard Williams, just without the quick athleticism to impact the quarterback within the first couple seconds of a play, but you can't always get that. And Dexter Lawrence is very good as far as the next tier, kind of type of defensive lineman. Because again, very good against the run, uses his hands very well, can actually rush the passer despite being as big as he is. Depth wise too, I mentioned Danny Shelton. He can play in the NFL. He's shown, not greatly, but he's okay. BJ Hill is a player I actually think does pretty well. He's similar to Austin Johnson, just not quite as good in that he does pretty well when he gets in. Doesn't get in a whole lot or hasn't played a ton of snaps up to this point in his career, but played enough for me to be pretty confident in him as a rotational guy. Past that, Rocky McIntosh, he is ranked here, but he's played a very small sample size himself. I'm not quite as encouraged about him. But you definitely have five guys who I'm like, hell yeah, give me those dudes on my team. And not a whole lot of teams can say that. At edge, not as rosy, but this team does a very good job of getting production out of the edge position, I will say. They got it out of Kyler Fackrell. They've gotten it out of guys like Lorenzo Carter. And frankly, most of these guys played a lot of snaps last year because of all the injuries they had. So what do you have with these guys specifically? So Lorenzo Carter, he is a guy who I'm comfortable as one of your starters. He plays the run pretty well. Actually, he isn't an idiot as a pass rusher. That's as big of a compliment as I can give. Pass rushers are actually kind of like running backs in that there's not all that many who are actually good at it. There are a lot of guys who are, and given, positive situations are going to win. Sometimes he's one of those guys, but not at the high end for sure. You have Azeez Ojulari. He is a rookie. He shouldn't be ranked there. Who knows with rookies? But past that, you have actually enough depth for me to have hope, right? Because you bring in Ryan Anderson and Ifeadi Odenigbo, two guys who I know can play as rotational, more run defending ends in the NFL. You have Nico Lalos, a guy who, in albeit very small sample size last year, I actually thought was kind of good as a pass rusher, actually, even. Trent Harris, fairly similar story, but on the run defense side of things. Neither of those guys were given a whole lot of chances by the end of the year, which is very questionable to me. But I actually think they could have something in at least one of those guys. Cam Brown, he's pretty whatever, but maybe the dude tries hard. O'Shane Ximines, Carter Coughlin, those two guys I'm exceedingly less excited about. I think that they're pretty clearly bad. O'Shane Ximines, despite being drafted as a edge rusher, played like stand-up middle linebacker at times last year and was not good at it. So that contributes to why his ranking is so low. I will say, just fucking weird. I don't know how that happened. But yeah, disregarding those guys, there's like 5 guys again where I'm like, yeah, they'll probably get something out of there. So then you talk about the middle linebacker position, off-ball linebacker, whatever. That's not great. I'm actually going to start with Blake Martinez there. So Blake Martinez, you know exactly what you're getting with him at this point, and it is not good. It's not the like absolute end of the world, especially as long as you're not playing like a stretch zone type of offense, which we'll talk about later. But he's going to have the brains to work well, tackle to tackle, and he is going to try hard and pursue until the play is dead. That's the positives. The negatives, he is just not an NFL athlete. He so struggles to reach sideline to sideline at a meaningful rate. He cannot cover anybody in pass coverage under like any circumstance ever almost. And he's going to get you killed again when you play teams that put a lot of pressure on him to be able to make plays past the tackles in either direction. Tay Crowder, he was Mr. Relevant last year, and I like him kind of a lot. He was in this goofy rotation of middle linebackers that they had last year. He got hurt at one point after he became the starter, unfortunately, but he was the starter for a reason. He's kind of good. He knows what he's doing. He plays the run pretty well. He's actually an okay athlete. I don't like him as a pass defender. I don't want to talk about him too much. He's not like somebody I want starting on my team still at this point, but I don't think you're screwed with him. And yeah, I like him. Past those guys, though, Reggie Ragland he's kind of the same thing as Blake Martinez, but just even slower and even more like he's like a guard to guard run defender. He can do that really well, but is that a modern NFL skill? No. And then Devontae Downs is just bad. He's just bad. He doesn't do anything positive. So then we talk about corners. And here, back to positive. Yay. Their corners are actually pretty goddamn good. So James Bradbury's awesome. I love James Bradbury. He's one of the few corners in the NFL who's actually capable of matching up with the elite receivers like a Devontae Adams, like a Stephon Diggs, like a Julio Jones. Now, he's not going to or Michael Thomas too. He's not going to shut those guys down, right? He's not Jalen Ramsey. He's not Stephon Gilmore, but he's absolutely as close as you're going to get. He's really, really outstanding. Really, really good. Then you have bring in Adoree Jackson, who as a second corner, I like quite a bit. He's not a great shutdown man coverage guy most of the time, but he's a really, really good athlete. He's the type of corner who can keep up with these good, the Stephon Diggs types, the Robert Woods types, these outside receivers who are very shifty and quick. And he can move around a little bit on the field too. He's smart. Like he's a good player, especially as your number 2 corner. Like you're doing really good. Depth wise, a whole lot of guys who have been in the Giants system, I will say, but not super excited about. Madre Harper, Sam Beal, been there a couple of years. Isaac Yiadom, I will say, danger there. He's really, really bad. He looked serviceable at times at the end of last year, because he did end up starting games for the Giants. But I'm very comfortable giving that credit to how the Giants played defensively, as opposed to him. He was still put on islands with guys, getting burned pretty regularly and stuff like that. So yeah, you can do a lot better than him. And frankly, they have the options on this roster. Well, hopefully they won't have to turn to him. I'll mention too the rankings for Chris Milton and Josh Kalu. Those are actually, they're both slot corners in those rankings. So don't get too excited when you see that. Both those guys, though, I actually think can maybe play a little bit. Not to talk about him too much. Then in the slot, Logan Ryan. Logan Ryan's absolutely awesome. He still moves around very, very well. Super versatile. Actually matters as a coverage player despite all that stuff. Because what happens a lot of times with those really versatile players, right? Like a player like Jimmy Ward would be an example, where they do all this stuff, but they're not all that good at any of it. Jimmy Ward's fine. I don't want to show him, but Logan Ryan can do all that stuff and actually be good at it. He's legitimately useful as a run defender. He actually can cover guys in man coverage. He is really smart, really instinctive as a zone defender. Love Logan Ryan. Past him, though, What I get worried about is who they're going to lean on to actually play. Darnay Holmes as a rookie was really, 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 really bad, especially towards the beginning of the year. I will admit that he got a little bit better by the end of the year, but I think it's yet to be seen if that's just because the Giants defense was playing better as a whole and playing against much worse competition. It's probably a combination of the two. We'll see if he gets better. It's definitely possible he was just a rookie corner, but he is somebody that scares me as if they're planning on putting him on the field a lot because, again, especially at the beginning of the year, boy, was he bad. And then the last position on the defense, we got the safeties. They have a chance to be pretty good here. Jabril Peppers is a player I actually do like. He plays the run pretty well. He is another of these versatile guys for sure. He isn't good as a coverage player, but he's not quite as bad as like the guy he replaced here in Landon Collins. Landon Collins is actually not that bad either, but he can do some things. He is very, very athletic actually as far as a man coverage guy. Against tight ends, it's hard to do a whole lot better. But he does still struggle, especially as a deep safety. Then you have Julian Love. He was drafted as a corner, ended up moving to safety. And frankly, when he's been on the field, I think he's been serviceable as that like downfield, deep center fielder. I don't think he's been particularly good, though. And he's yet to be forced into play a large number of snaps consistently for the Giants defense. That's probably going to change this year. And I'm definitely worried about that result. Or I don't know if worried is the right word, but I have questions about how well that's going to work. Then you have Xavier McKinney, second-round pick last year. I actually like him when he was on so he's ranked there, but he played a very small sample of snaps, so keep that in mind. But he definitely didn't suck, which as a rookie secondary player is a really, really good sign. He's the type of safety in the NFL where unless he's like incredibly good, like Jamal Adams level, it's tough to say he's super valuable because there's so many of these like more or less box safeties who play and can do it at a decent clip. But I think he's already definitely one of those, and we'll see, he was just a rookie again, if he has a chance to get better. So when we talk about this defense as a whole, truth is, they're onto something with Patrick Graham, their defensive coordinator. They play a kind of goofy, soft zone. They're going to keep a lot of stuff in front of them. They're going to be able to move up and get, and make plays. They generate pressure as a scheme, which is not something that I give credit to lightly. That doesn't happen for a lot of NFL teams. Obviously teams run blitzes and stunts and stuff like that, but consistently creating like good situations or easy situations for your elite pass rushers to win in is super valuable and doesn't happen very often outside of teams like the Ravens. So Giants, they're one of those teams, and that's really a good thing, especially given their like edge talent. But yeah, so their defense functioning as a whole, as a run defense, they're probably gonna be pretty good because of the front that they have and how disciplined they play. That is with the very notable caveat of any time they play a stretch zone scheme like, the modern day 49ers, Rams, Vikings, and stuff like that. Blake Martinez is going to get him killed in that matchup. He's literally shown that every time he's ever played one of those teams in his career. So, yeah. But other than that, I think they're going to function just fine. As a pass defense, I also think they're going to be pretty decent. They're going to have enough pass rush because of what I said and because of the talent that like Leonard Williams brings. Plus, it's not like their edge rushers are garbage. And their corners are so good that teams are going to struggle to like kill them. Now, I don't expect this defense to be elite. I think they definitely lack the high-end talent to be like a shutdown type of thing. But they're going to be good enough to keep them in games. And like I said, with how the offense works, we'll see. Because when you look ahead at their schedule, it's actually pretty encouraging for them. Because when you look at like the strengths and weaknesses that I've outlined throughout this video, outside of week 1 and week 2, which is tough because what you're concerned about offensively is if you're going against a team with like a dominant defensive front who's going to control this young and inexperienced, maybe bad offensive line. You're looking at that, right? And that does exist in week 1, week 2 with Broncos and the Washington football team. But past that, shit. You get the Rams with Aaron Donald, but then it's not until you get like the Buccaneers in week 11 where there's a team I'm particularly worried about in that area. And then defensively, right, you're worried about guys who are going to be comfortable just eating up your zone up and down the field. And again, that doesn't really exist until I don't know week 8. Mahomes and the Chiefs will do that for sure. And the Raiders and the Buccaneers will do that. But like other than those three, there's some guys who can do that. Matt Ryan with the Falcons, Dak with the Cowboys, but neither of those guys are particularly fitting into that play style, especially at these like the current points in their career. So frankly, I think schematically this team like holds up well in this schedule, like almost very well. And I don't think they're gonna blow teams out like ever. But I would expect them to be competitive in almost every game. And frankly, with how the NFL goes, they could win it. They could end up winning a decent amount of these. So don't love this team. I think their ceiling is, very like, I do think they can make the playoffs for sure. Past that, effectively nothing. But that's saying something for a team, again, that was just 5-11 last year. So yeah, that's the 2021 New York Giants.